This is Science Applied by Bruce Scott, and it's a number of short teaching segments as a retired scientist for 40 years. I'm bringing this up because there's so much talk these days about no one believes in God, no one believes in Yeshua, no one believes in Jesus, no one believes in and if they do, they just kind of give a, well, we do, but we don't really hear and obey him. It's science. It says everything is follow the science. The science tells everything, and if you don't follow the science, I hate you. That is the exact opposite of the understanding of science. Science is testing and theories and doing some kind of continuous research through hypotheses and actions and seeing if you can get a repeat over and over again consistently so you can get a fact. And then it becomes a scientific fact. FACT. Let me give an example of that. A person standing in the road and he says, I'm standing perfectly still. And I said, oh, so you're standing perfectly still. Yes. And people say, yes, it's a fact. Look at the science. He's standing perfectly still, and we're looking at him, and he's standing perfectly still. So he's perfectly still. So that's a science. Okay. Well, let's test that. So you're not moving at all, no matter what. Well, just to make sure, we're going to take this doll, represent the man, and we're going to put it in a block of ice and freeze it and set it on the ground. Now that's perfectly still, and there, once again, is a fact. And so if you disbelieve anything we just say, then we hate you. That's the society we live in. We've turned science into a god. Well, let's open up this god and let's give it a test. So if you're standing at the equator, the earth moves around in a circle. It spins on an axis. And it takes just about 24 hours. It's not exactly, but pretty close to that. Well, that means you're moving. Excuse me, you're in a block of ice, mister. It's a doll. But that doll is sitting there perfectly still, but it's moving 1,000 miles an hour. Now, well, what if it's at the North Pole? Okay, let's go with the science on that. So you're standing perfectly at the North Pole, and you're just kind of spinning, you're just turning, and it takes you 24 hours to turn around. You're not going 1,000 miles an hour, so Mr. Skeptic, Mr. Science is perfect. Okay. No, you're not. Because you see, the Earth is going around the sun. And so it takes about, it's that's circular all the way around. That's about 584 million miles around the sun, divided by 365.25 days, divided by 24 hours in a day. Now that gives you about 1.6 million a day around the sun. So you're moving 1.6 million miles a day. Think about that. You're moving incredibly fast. You're moving about 67,627 miles an hour. That's faster than anything that ever existed on Earth. Okay. So you're moving. But no, you're going faster than 67,627 miles an hour, Mr. Science. You see, the sun is going around the Milky Way, a galaxy, and we're about halfway through the Milky Way. So we're spinning, and we're going about 400 and 90,000 miles an hour around the Milky Way. The sun is. So we're a little faster than 67,000. We're actually going 448,000 miles an hour. Now, we're not done yet. We're not done yet, Mr. Skeptic, Mr. Science. There's a lot more to it. See how science isn't as perfect as you think it is. There's more to it. The more you look, the deeper you go, the more you find out. So if you say you're standing still, you're a liar. But no, everyone else is a liar because you can see that doll is encased in that piece of ice and it's not moving anywhere. Well, that piece of ice with that doll in it is going 448,000 miles around the Milky Way. But wait. The Milky Way is moving away. Now, when we get all these fancy Hubble telescopes and all this stuff, and we look out in outer space, we see things like red line shifts and all things. It tells us that if something is, if we're going 448,000 miles an hour and something is beside us going 448,000 miles, it will have a light that will emit a certain color. If it's going farther away from us than we're catching up with, that's called a red line shift. So it changes by simply looking at something. You can tell if it's moving away, if it's moving the same, or if it's moving left and right, or if it's coming towards you. But just by the looks of the light. So how fast is the Milky Way moving through space? And by the way, everything is expanding. And the answer to that in time is it's for millions and billions of years, this expanse in space, this trillions of stars, billions of galaxies, billions, not even millions. We've now found out in the last 20, 30 years. So what everybody said in perfect science 100 years ago, they're way off. So how fast is that Milky Way going? Well, it's going about 1.3 million miles an hour. So that doll and that piece of ice on the ground that you're looking at that looks perfectly still is actually traveling at 1.3 million miles an hour. Now, it gets better than that. The speed of light is about 186,282 miles an hour. That's pretty fast. That's even hard to imagine things just like that. But so if its light goes at 186,282 miles an hour and the Milky Way is moving at 1.3 million miles an hour, well, that means that we are continuing to expand. Life is very old, but it looks like it's going to continually get very old for a very, 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 very long time. So the last thing we should be doing is judging one another and criticizing each other and using the word and a flippant attitude of science to force people to do things. And one of the reasons is the COVID thing. It's like the science says you need to stay home. If I put a mask on, and by the way, I wore those face masks, those N94s, N95s, I mean. And I actually wore the other breather units that had the self-supplied battery-operated air, so I didn't have to worry about the filtering system. It was fancy. I wore this stuff for 40 years. And if you put a mask on like this, you put a mask on like this, and you think you're blocking out things, but what you do is if it's not perfectly on your face, when you breathe, it sucks in and sucks out. It acts like a vacuum cleaner, and the odds are you will get bad germs inside of your mask by the sucking power of any of the leaks around the side. And almost everybody I've seen that wears these masks, and even on television, so thousands and thousands of people I've seen wearing these masks, are wearing them improperly. You have to wear and take off a mask whenever it gets wet because of your breath, or it's no good. It actually acts like a sponge and it sucks up terrible things that are in the air. So wearing a mask is the wrong thing to do. Keeping hydrated, drinking plenty of fluids, keeping yourself like a wet sponge better than a dry sponge, dehydrated, is 10 times better for you than wearing a mask. Simply not touching your face, touching your eyes, touching your nose, touching any of your orifices with these hands is another thing that you do. Keeping social distance is just the way to be anyway, and shaking hands has always been the stupidest thing to do. But to wear masks and stay in homes and not sit there and be subject to the world at large where your immune system gets traces of things that are not good for you, and because it's inside of you, it begins to build up an immune system. If you keep yourself in a perfectly clean house, perfectly sterile house that's closed out from the outside world or from any germ that ever exists, after a period of time, your body becomes, the immune system doesn't kick in because it has no reason to. So when something does happen later on, you're weaker than you've ever been. I cannot understand anything that's going on with this COVID stuff that makes any sense. It is the exact opposite. Somebody is having fun controlling you. Somebody is altering your mind intentionally. And it is, in my opinion, evil. And that's why we go right back to science. Don't use, how dare people use the word science to force people to do what they will on them, no matter what, and they will do it. And this is a sad time we're going through. This is a very evil society. And unfortunately, the youngsters, those under 40, are really lost. They have one, we're one generation from totally stupid people, and we've met it. Now we're these little kids, these poor little children at home are sitting there, and they're not going to get what is definitely needed, what the Father in heaven created for them to be with other little children and build up immunity systems and put dirt in their face on occasion and so forth, and colds and flu and everything else that comes down the pike. It's going to be okay. But to do what people are doing, that is slow suicide for this nation and the world, period. This is all about science. See you to the next time. This would be part one. Part two comes next.